I know also that many parents have concerns about the lack of grades and tests in some of the alternative schools.
Right.
Do you face this concern?
Well, in the primary school, children aren't meant to get grades anyway, officially. Now, the fact that schools do give out some form of evaluation, whether it's a letter or even in the class, the children get little stars and so forth, and they can tell almost from the size of the tick they get from the teacher whether it's highly appreciated or not, or valued. So there is always a feedback system, which is what's important. Some parents over-rely on that feedback, and they send the message to the child: if you don't get good grades, you won't get good presents, and so on and so forth. This is, again, the externalization of what should be an intrinsic motivation, a natural level of learning. Children should want to learn for the sake of learning. And if schools cannot help children understand why it's fascinating to learn about, all the different aspects of life and the journey of life, then something is terribly wrong. So grades, the children should be able to grade themselves along the way. The teachers can do give, and even here at the Lighthouse, we do give reports and feedback to parents to get a general idea. But we try to keep it as basic and as simple as possible. And we want to avoid the idea that this grade, actually more important than the grade or the achievement, is the effort put in. So one student can go from a 50 to a 60, if we use numeric examples, and have achieved so much more than a student who was at a 90 and he went to a 95 with minimum of effort. So that children has the first example, has achieved so much more. They've come such a long way in their learning from where their starting point is. So, and this is another confusion with the grades, that they tend to be comparative to other students when they need to reflect more about the child's progress in respect to themselves.
But what would be sort of, one or two arguments that you would say to a parent who is sort of very bold in the idea of that grades, this is something that should be there for sure? What would you say to this parent?
I can say that that's an option to be put on the table, because remember, we're co-creating the ideal education. And I don't have all the answers. The only thing I know for sure is that I don't know. And if the parent is willing to accept that maybe they don't have all the answers either, then we can look at how grades might be useful, when and where and how to use them. And in conjunction with the student, depending on the age, of course, and the maturity, to see, okay, if that's a path to go down to, that it's going to, the team decide will be to the benefit of the child, then maybe we can. And I'll give an example of where we do operate like this. In the case of homework, it's a classic example of how much homework is an appropriate amount of homework. What's the magic number? Does anybody have that in their pocket? You go from country to country, from teacher to teacher, from school to school, from time to time, and it's a constantly changing concept. So at the Lighthouse, our philosophy would be, okay, let's see what works. Let's try one version or try another version. I've had parents say they want less and less or no homework, and I know systems like Finland where they give minimal or none at all in many cases. And I've had parents who want more because they believe that having homework, even if they don't need it, instills discipline and responsibility in the child. And there's a truth to that, that everyone has a job to do and so forth. I don't know if that's the best way of doing it, but that's something that as a team we could decide to do together. I would want the child to be a participant, an active participant in that conversation. Say, all right, well, what if I do my homework so well for so long? Can we then reduce it? Or can I have other options and find a formula that works for everyone?
This is a very interesting example. I'm thinking, how do you actually, maybe you can also give an example, protect the child's voice in this conversation? Because I would imagine that there are parents and a teacher, and the parents would say, hey, I want him to do more homework. So how actually the child could say no to this, really? So how do you, as a potential facilitator or the other side of this conversation, could protect the child need and the child voice?
Okay, that's a good question. That's why I'm so glad that I started off not as an educator, but as a psychologist. And worked as a family therapist for many years before I moved into the educational system. And I realized the same conversations happens in a home. The parents seem to think they know what's going on, and they'll argue between them what's going on. There's very little actual dialogue with the teenager or the child in the story. And one of the ground rules, if you like, is that we are all equal. And nobody's feelings or point of view is more important than anybody else's. And that we all need to work together to find a way to meet everybody's needs and concerns. And you apply this into the educational process, and that the child is an equal in the room, in that discussion, in creating that plan. In fact, it's for the child's long-term interest. So they need to be heard and validated as to their need, not necessarily the solution they put on the table. If a child says, I want to be more independent, therefore I want to go out and come home whenever I like, you wouldn't necessarily put that on the table, but you would say, okay, how can we find a way to value your independence? So the same is true in that meeting with the team, that the child has an equal voice and feels heard, and feels understood, and feels that they have the ability to make a difference. Maybe not, nobody has it all every time the way they want, but they're included in the process.
That's a good segue to a very practical question that I have regarding the homework, actually. So what is your view on this? Like, should actually children have a lot of homework? Should parents help them with homework, which is a very common case in some families? Who is responsible for getting homework done? So very practical questions for many parents, I think.
In cases like this, I think we have to ask the more meta-educational question of what is the homework aiming to achieve? Is it meant to improve memorization of what's going on in class, and it's that kind of lesson where you just have to remember a lot of facts, like the times table? Is it about understanding concepts, and this is practicing concepts? And how does the child learn? How much time does the child need to spend to absorb these this new learning? So given that there's no one answer to that, I think if we all put down the different perspectives we have on this issue, you probably will find that there are maybe 2 or 3 different answers. And yes, some of those answers might be in conflict with each other. And if everyone's willing to say, all right, we'll try this option for a while, we'll try extra homework, we'll try a standard amount of homework, or we'll try minimum homework, well, none at all, and see what the educational outcome is, see what the effect on the child's motivation is. Because maybe in the end, you can win the battle, you can win all the battles, and lose the war. And this is where you get your child to conform, to do all the things that he or she is supposed to do, even get the good grades, and suddenly at 17 or 18 they drop out of school, or they go to college and they drop out, or they become drug addicts or something, because inside they haven't felt valued and recognized and competent. And without all that, when they're left to their own devices, it all comes apart. So everyone being treated as an equal, that makes a huge difference, I think.
So how do parents can understand that this amount of freedom is good enough, is not too much for a child, and he or she is actually learning and getting new knowledge instead of just having fun, let's say?
Okay, well, like I said, there are reports and there is a feedback process, although we believe that the child should be active in that process. And at the end of the day, you can't have genuine freedom without responsibility, without accountability. So freedom to be fully realized, it must be realized in the context of the conditions it needs to be effective. So giving children choices means, okay, you have the choice to do A, B, and C, but you will have to deal with the consequences. You will have to demonstrate or show that you have succeeded, you have set goals and you have followed up, and that you know how to use your freedom responsibly. in whatever aspect of your education you're using. Even if it's just saying, letting them choose to do their homework or not. So you think you can not do the homework and achieve A, B, and C? Okay, we can try this. So there is freedom, but if it's not working, are you prepared to commit to another plan if it's not working? So this way that freedom is balanced.